Have you found anything, Miss Chen?
I found a lot of things. The problem isn't in one place, it's everywhere.
The Armory Ghost, how a civilian contractor earned her place among warriors. The brass casing hit the concrete floor with a metallic ping as Staff Sergeant Becca Chen stripped down another malfunctioning M4, her civilian contractor badge catching the fluorescent light. Around her, Navy SEALs cleaned their gear with the reverence of men whose lives depended on mechanical precision. None of them noticed the ghost in the corner working miracles. 28 years old with oil-stained fingers and safety glasses perpetually perched on her head. Becca moved through the armory like a surgeon through an operating room. Her MIT engineering degree meant nothing. Here only results mattered. The SEALs saw a contractor, but the weapons recognized a master craftsman who spoke their language fluently. What happened next would prove that respect isn't earned through rank or uniform, but through the quiet excellence that transforms good weapons into perfect ones. Sometimes the most important battles are won not on distant shores, but in the workshops where warriors' tools are born. Naval Special Warfare Command, Coronado, California, 2024. The Armory existed in a world of controlled chaos where million-dollar weapon systems were maintained by people who understood that mechanical failure meant human death. The facility hummed with activity as SEAL teams rotated through training cycles, their equipment requiring constant maintenance modification and improvement. Becca's workbench occupied a corner of the main bay surrounded by precision tools that she'd bought with her own money because military procurement couldn't match her standards. The environment was intensely masculine, heavily regulated, and suspicious of outsiders, especially civilian contractors who lacked military experience. Sound bounced off concrete walls and metal surfaces, creating an industrial symphony of bolts, cycling tools clanking, and voices calling out specifications. In this temple of warfare, every person had earned their place through blood, sweat, and proven competence. Everyone except the quiet woman who made their weapons sing. Becca Chen had grown up in her father's machine shop in San Francisco, learning precision work before she learned to drive. Her immigrant parents had pushed her toward engineering, but her heart belonged to the tactile world of metal and mechanics. MIT had given her theoretical knowledge, but the shop had taught her the art of making things work better than their designers intended. After graduation, she'd chosen defense contracting over Silicon Valley, drawn by the challenge of perfecting tools that saved lives. Her specialty was weapons optimization, taking factory specifications and pushing them beyond their intended limits. As a civilian contractor, Becca existed in military limbo essential, but not officially part of the team respected for her skills, but excluded from the brotherhood that defined SEAL culture. She worked alone, her interactions with operators limited to technical discussions about tolerances and modifications. The pay was excellent, but the isolation was challenging for someone who thrived on collaboration. Her work was her identity, each weapon a canvas for her engineering artistry. The SEALs brought her problems that military armorers couldn't solve, trusting her instincts while maintaining professional distance. She was the ghost in the machine, invisible until needed. Becca possessed an almost supernatural ability to diagnose weapons problems through sound touch and intuition. Her engineering training was supplemented by an artist's eye for detail and a perfectionist's refusal to accept good enough. She could feel vibrations that others missed, hear harmonics that revealed hidden flaws, and visualize mechanical relationships that existed only in her mind. Her modifications weren't just functional, they were elegant, turning mass-produced weapons into precision instruments. More importantly, she understood that every weapon she touched would be used by someone who might not come home, making her work both technical challenge and sacred trust. Becca's greatest challenge wasn't technical. It was earning acceptance in a community that valued tradition hierarchy and shared sacrifice above individual expertise. The SEAL's skepticism was professional, not personal. Civilians hadn't earned their place through Bud-S training or combat deployment. Her gender added another layer of complexity, with some operators questioning whether a woman could truly understand weapons designed for male warriors. The conflict was subtle but persistent, manifesting in overlooked contributions, dismissed suggestions, and the constant need to prove herself through results rather than credentials. Her expertise was acknowledged but not embraced, her presence tolerated but not welcomed. The challenge was transforming professional competence into personal trust, proving that her commitment to their mission was as absolute as any warrior's, even if expressed through different means. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's HK-416 had been his companion through 6 deployments, its serial number etched in his memory like a battle scar. The weapon had saved his life in Kandahar, performed flawlessly in Syria, and never failed him when failure meant death. But now it was betraying him, intermittent jamming during rapid-fire accuracy, degrading with each range session, and feeding issues that appeared randomly. 3 military armorers had examined it, each declaring it within specifications, while missing the subtle problems that only a true expert could detect. Morrison's trust in the weapon was shaken, and with deployment looming, he needed answers. "I've heard you're good," he said simply, his tone carrying the weight of someone who'd run out of options. "Can you fix it?" The question wasn't just technical, it was personal. A SEAL operator entrusting his life to a civilian contractor he'd never spoken to. Becca's response was equally direct. "I'll need 3 days and complete access to your ammunition specifications." The exchange was professional, but carried undercurrents of mutual evaluation. Morrison was testing her confidence, while Becca was accepting responsibility for a warrior's survival. The weapon between them represented more than mechanical function. It was a bridge between 2 worlds that rarely intersected. Becca's approach to Morrison's rifle was methodical and comprehensive, treating the weapon like a patient requiring diagnosis rather than a machine needing repair. Her first step was complete disassembly, documenting every component with precision measurements and photographs. The HK-416's complexity required specialized tools and knowledge of German engineering tolerances, but her analysis revealed problems that superficial inspection had missed. The bolt carrier group showed microscopic wear patterns that suggested timing issues, while the barrel's chrome lining had begun to degrade in ways that affected accuracy. Her preparation involved researching Morrison's deployment history, understanding the environmental stresses his weapon had endured, and identifying the specific performance parameters that mattered most to a SEAL operator. The challenge wasn't just fixing the problems, it was improving the weapon's performance beyond factory specifications while maintaining its reliability under extreme conditions. Her plan involved precision machining, custom modifications, and the installation of components that weren't available through normal military channels. The work required 72 hours of continuous effort, with each step building on the previous one to create a weapon that would exceed Morrison's expectations. Most importantly, she understood that this was her audition, the moment when her technical skills would be evaluated by someone whose life depended on the results. The first breakthrough came when Becca discovered that Morrison's accuracy problems weren't caused by barrel wear, but by harmonic vibrations that affected bullet trajectory. Her solution was elegant, a custom-machined barrel tuner that allowed precise adjustment of the weapon's resonant frequency. The modification required mathematical calculations that most armorers couldn't perform, but her engineering background made the physics intuitive. The jamming issues were more complex, requiring microscopic analysis of the bolt face and chamber dimensions. Her diagnosis revealed that repeated firing had caused metal fatigue in the bolt extension, creating timing problems that occurred only under specific temperature and ammunition combinations. The solution required precision machining and the installation of a component she'd designed specifically for this weapon. The feeding problems were the most challenging, requiring complete redesign of the magazine interface and buffer system. Her modifications transformed the weapon from a mass-produced tool into a precision instrument tailored to Morrison's specific needs and fighting style. Each improvement was documented and tested with before and after performance data that demonstrated measurable improvements in accuracy, reliability, and durability. The work was invisible to casual inspection, but revolutionary in its impact on the weapon's performance. The first challenge emerged when Morrison's improved rifle performance attracted attention from his teammates, who began requesting similar modifications to their own weapons. Becca found herself overwhelmed by demand, her workbench becoming a pilgrimage site for operators seeking competitive advantages. The volume of requests exceeded her capacity, forcing her to establish priorities and timelines that sometimes conflicted with mission requirements. Her civilian contractor status complicated matters. She lacked authority to refuse requests from operators, but she also couldn't work miracles on impossible deadlines. The pressure was intensified by the technical complexity of each weapon, as SEALs used diverse platforms requiring specialized knowledge and custom solutions. Her reputation was growing, but so were the expectations. The situation escalated when her modifications began outperforming weapons maintained by military armorers, creating professional jealousy and institutional resistance. Some armorers questioned her methods, arguing that civilian contractors shouldn't modify weapons beyond manufacturer specifications. Others worried that her improvements might void warranties or create liability issues if weapons failed in combat. The military bureaucracy was uncomfortable with a civilian contractor whose work exceeded official standards, while budget constraints made it difficult to procure the specialized components her modifications required. Becca found herself caught between operators who demanded her services and administrators who questioned her authority to provide them. The conflict was both personal and institutional, testing her ability to navigate military politics while maintaining technical excellence. The crisis deepened when one of Becca's modified weapons experienced a catastrophic failure during a training exercise, though investigation revealed the problem was caused by defective ammunition rather than her modifications. The incident triggered a formal review of her work, with investigators questioning every modification she'd made and demanding documentation that civilian contractors weren't required to maintain. Her reputation was under attack, her methods scrutinized, and her future employment uncertain. The SEALs who'd benefited from her work were caught between loyalty to someone who'd improved their capabilities and adherence to military protocols that discouraged civilian innovation. The investigation threatened to end her career and validate critics who'd argued that outsiders shouldn't work on weapon systems. The military bureaucracy's investigation attracted attention from multiple levels of command, with officials questioning whether civilian contractors should be allowed to modify weapons beyond manufacturer specifications. Safety inspectors demanded comprehensive testing of all her modifications, while procurement officers worried about liability issues and warranty complications. The investigation was complicated by the fact that her improvements had measurably enhanced weapon performance, making it difficult to argue that her work was unnecessary or dangerous. Media attention from defense publications created external pressure, with some articles praising her innovation, while others questioned the wisdom of relying on civilian contractors for critical military functions. The broader defense contracting community watched her case carefully, understanding that the outcome would affect policies governing civilian involvement in weapons development. Professional associations debated whether her work represented beneficial innovation or dangerous deviation from established procedures. The pressure was intensified by budget constraints that made military leadership reluctant to support expensive modifications that weren't officially required. Congressional oversight committees began asking questions about contractor authority and accountability, while union representatives worried about civilian contractors displacing military personnel in specialized roles. Under extreme pressure, Becca began to understand that technical excellence alone wasn't sufficient for success in the military environment. Her interactions with investigators taught her to document her work with legal precision, while her relationships with operators deepened her understanding of their needs and concerns. The crisis forced her to develop political skills that her engineering education had never addressed, learning to navigate institutional resistance while maintaining her commitment to technical innovation. Her communication skills improved as she learned to explain complex modifications in terms that administrators could understand and approve. The experience taught her that her work wasn't just about weapons. It was about the warriors who used them, the missions they supported, and the institutional culture that defined military effectiveness. Her relationship with the SEAL community evolved from professional service to personal commitment, her understanding of their sacrifice deepening her dedication to their success. The investigation, while stressful, validated her methods and established her credibility within the military establishment. Most importantly, she learned that earning respect in the military required not just competence, but persistence, humility, and the willingness to submit to scrutiny that civilians rarely faced. The signs of approaching crisis multiplied as the investigation expanded beyond her work to question the entire civilian contracting program. Budget cuts threatened to eliminate contractor positions, while new regulations proposed limiting civilian access to weapon systems. Her supporters within the SEAL community were being transferred to new assignments, reducing her network of advocates and protection. The media attention had attracted competitors who questioned her methods and qualifications, creating professional rivals who sought to undermine her reputation. The investigation's preliminary findings suggested that while her work was excellent, it exceeded the authority granted to civilian contractors, potentially creating legal liability for the military. Her personal life was being scrutinized, with investigators questioning her security clearance and background. The pressure was building toward a decision that would either validate her contribution to military readiness or end her career in defense contracting. The crisis was complicated by the fact that her modifications had become integral to several operators' effectiveness, making her departure potentially dangerous to mission success. The investigation was approaching its conclusion, with her future hanging in the balance of bureaucratic decisions that had little to do with her technical competence. The secure phone rang at 0347 hours, its encrypted signal carrying news that would shatter Becca's world. Team 3 had been compromised during a high-value target operation in Syria, with multiple casualties resulting from weapons failures that had left operators defenseless at the critical moment. The preliminary report was devastating. Standard military weapons had malfunctioned under extreme conditions, while the modified weapons that Becca had worked on had continued functioning, potentially saving lives. But the investigation team was focusing on a different narrative. Civilian contractor modifications had created a reliability disparity that had affected tactical planning and unit cohesion. The blame was being shifted from institutional failures to individual innovation, with Becca's work being portrayed as dangerous deviation from proven military standards. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, wounded but alive, had credited his modified rifle with saving his life, but his testimony was being dismissed as subjective operator preference rather than objective evidence. The incident had triggered a congressional inquiry into civilian contractor authority, with Becca's case becoming a symbol of broader concerns about military readiness and accountability. The media narrative was brutal. Civilian contractors' weapons modifications linked to mission failure dominated headlines, while the nuanced reality of her contribution was buried in technical details that journalists couldn't understand. Her security clearance was suspended pending investigation, her access to the base revoked, and her future employment in defense contracting effectively ended. The weapons she'd perfected were being recalled for safety evaluation, while the operators who trusted her work were being questioned about their judgment. Becca faced the impossible choice that would define her relationship with the military forever. Accept responsibility for problems she hadn't caused, validating the narrative that civilian contractors were dangerous loose cannons who endangered military personnel, or fight back against institutional scapegoating, risking her career and reputation to defend the truth about her work and its impact on operator safety. The mathematical reality was brutal. The military had the resources, authority, and institutional support to destroy her professionally, while she had only her technical expertise and the private support of operators who couldn't publicly advocate for her. The investigation was being conducted by people who didn't understand her work, judged by standards that prioritized bureaucratic compliance over operational effectiveness. Her personal integrity warred with practical survival. Her commitment to the operators who trusted her conflicted with her need to protect her own future. The choice was complicated by the knowledge that her fight wouldn't just affect her, It would impact the future of civilian innovation in military systems, the careers of operators who'd supported her, and the broader question of whether excellence could survive institutional mediocrity. The decision crystallized around fundamental questions about duty, truth, and the meaning of service. Was her obligation to the institution that employed her, or to the warriors whose lives depended on her work? The choice would determine not just her immediate survival, but her ability to live with herself afterward, whether she'd be remembered as someone who'd fought for truth or someone who'd sacrificed it for personal preservation. Becca's moment of decision came when she realized that her silence wouldn't protect the operators who'd trusted her, but would condemn future generations to the same institutional failures that had caused the Syria incident. Her response was carefully calculated, professionally delivered, and devastating in its precision. She requested a formal hearing where she could present evidence about her work, its impact on operator safety, and the real causes of the mission failure. The request was both legal right and tactical maneuver, forcing the investigation to address technical facts rather than institutional narratives. Her decision to fight back was supported by a detailed technical report that demonstrated the superior performance of her modified weapons, documented with data that bureaucrats couldn't dismiss or misinterpret. The evidence was overwhelming. Her modifications had improved reliability, accuracy, and maintainability beyond anything the military had achieved through standard procedures. But her greatest weapon was Morrison's testimony, delivered with the authority of someone who'd survived because of her work, and the credibility of someone who'd earned his place through blood and sacrifice. The combination of technical evidence and operator testimony created a narrative that the investigation couldn't suppress, forcing acknowledgement of her contribution while highlighting the institutional failures that had caused the real problems. The formal hearing was scheduled for 800 hours in the base's main conference room, with representatives from multiple commands, congressional staff, and defense industry officials in attendance. Becca's preparation was meticulous, her technical documentation organized with the precision of someone who understood that every claim would be challenged. She'd prepared visual presentations that demonstrated her modifications' impact on weapon performance, statistical analyses that proved their reliability advantages, and testimony from operators who'd used her equipment in combat. Her evidence was comprehensive but accessible, designed to educate rather than intimidate, to inform rather than overwhelm. The psychological preparation was equally important. She'd accepted that her military contracting career was probably over, but she was determined to ensure that the truth about her work would survive the institutional pressure to suppress it. Her appearance was carefully chosen to project competence and professionalism, her demeanor calm, despite the stress of facing career-ending accusations. The hearing represented more than personal vindication. It was about whether technical excellence could survive bureaucratic mediocrity, whether innovation could coexist with institutional conservatism, and whether the military would choose effectiveness over comfort. Her final preparation included accepting that victory might be Pyrrhic, that proving her competence might cost her everything she'd worked to achieve. The hearing room was charged with tension as various factions prepared to defend their positions and attack their opponents. Congressional representatives wanted accountability for the Syria incident, while military leadership sought to protect institutional reputation. Defense contractors worried about liability issues while operators privately supported Becca's work but couldn't publicly contradict their chain of command. The investigators presented their case with bureaucratic precision, focusing on regulatory compliance rather than operational effectiveness. Their narrative was simple. Civilian contractors had exceeded their authority, creating safety risks that had contributed to mission failure. The evidence was selectively presented, emphasizing procedure over performance, compliance over competence. Becca's response was measured but devastating her technical expertise, allowing her to dismantle their arguments with precision that left no room for counterattack. She demonstrated that her modifications had improved weapon reliability by 20%, reduced maintenance requirements by 40%, and increased operator confidence by measurable margins. The tension peaked when she presented audio recordings of operators describing how her work had saved their lives, their voices carrying the authority of people who'd earned their opinions through combat experience. The hearing had become a confrontation between institutional defensiveness and operational reality, with truth and politics colliding in ways that would reshape military contracting. The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Commander Morrison, still recovering from wounds sustained in Syria, entered the hearing room in dress uniform, his presence commanding immediate attention. His testimony was brief, but devastating. "Ma'am, the weapon that Ms. Chen modified for me functioned flawlessly during the firefight that wounded me. The standard weapons carried by other team members experienced multiple failures that compromised our mission and endangered our lives. Her work didn't cause problems, it prevented casualties." The words carried the weight of someone who'd paid for his opinions with blood, whose credibility couldn't be questioned by bureaucrats who'd never faced enemy fire. The investigators' response was immediate and desperate. "Commander, we appreciate your service, but technical specifications must be followed regardless of field performance." Morrison's answer was simple and crushing. "Sir, specifications that get people killed aren't worth the paper they're printed on." The exchange crystallized the fundamental conflict between institutional procedure and operational reality, between bureaucratic comfort and warrior effectiveness. The hearing's complexity deepened when defense industry representatives began questioning whether civilian contractors should be allowed to modify weapons beyond manufacturer specifications. Their concerns were financial. Becca's improvements made their products look inadequate, while her methods threatened their monopoly on military weapons development. The complication was legal as well as technical, with liability issues, warranty concerns, and regulatory compliance, creating a maze of bureaucratic obstacles. But the real complication was cultural. The military's institutional conservatism conflicted with its operational need for innovation, creating tension between following rules and achieving mission success. The investigators attempted to portray Becca's work as dangerous experimentation, but their arguments collapsed when confronted with performance data that demonstrated objective improvements. The industry representative's attacks on her methods were revealed as self-serving when she demonstrated that her modifications could be manufactured at lower cost than standard components. The hearing had become a broader examination of military procurement, civilian innovation, and the cultural barriers that prevented institutional adaptation. The complexity was overwhelming, but the central question remained simple. Would the military choose effectiveness over comfort, innovation over tradition, results over regulation. The decisive moment came when Becca presented her final piece of evidence, a detailed analysis of the Syria mission that revealed the real causes of the weapons' failures. Her investigation, conducted with the precision of someone who understood both the technical and tactical aspects of the incident, demonstrated that standard military weapons had failed due to maintenance procedures that she'd identified and corrected months earlier. The failures weren't caused by her modifications, they were prevented by them. Her data showed that modified weapons had functioned perfectly, while standard weapons had experienced a 34% failure rate under identical conditions. The statistics were irrefutable, the analysis unassailable, and the implications devastating to the investigation's credibility. Her presentation was delivered with the calm authority of someone who'd done the work that others had avoided, who'd identified problems that others had ignored, and who'd solved issues that others had deemed acceptable. The moment was both technical triumph and personal vindication, proving that her methods weren't just innovative, but necessary, that her work wasn't just valuable, but essential. The hearing room was silent as the implications sank in. The military had been prepared to sacrifice innovation for institutional comfort, to punish excellence for bureaucratic convenience, and to ignore reality for regulatory compliance. The breakthrough came when the congressional representative chairing the hearing made a statement that would reshape military contracting. Based on the evidence presented, it appears that Ms. Chen's modifications improved weapon reliability and potentially saved lives. The question isn't whether civilian contractors should be allowed to exceed manufacturer specifications, but whether the military can afford to prevent them from doing so. The words marked a fundamental shift in perspective from seeing civilian innovation as dangerous deviation to recognizing it as necessary improvement. The military's response was immediate and defensive, but the evidence was overwhelming and the political implications clear. The hearing had become a public examination of military effectiveness, with Becca's work serving as proof that innovation could triumph over institutional resistance. The breakthrough was validated when Morrison stood and requested permission to make a final statement. "Ma'am, I'm alive because of Ms. Chen's work. My teammates are alive because of her modifications. The military needs more people like her, not fewer." The words carried the authority of someone who'd earned his opinions through sacrifice, whose judgment couldn't be questioned by people who'd never faced the consequences of their decisions. The immediate resolution was both personal vindication and institutional reform. Becca's security clearance was restored, her access to the base reinstated, and her methods officially validated. More importantly, the military began implementing procedures that would encourage civilian innovation rather than punish it. Her work became the template for a new approach to weapons development, with civilian contractors empowered to exceed manufacturer specifications when improvements could be demonstrated. The Syria incident investigation was expanded to examine institutional failures rather than individual innovations, leading to broader reforms in military procurement and maintenance procedures. The hearing had become a catalyst for change that extended far beyond one woman's career. The congressional hearing created immediate changes in military contracting policies, with new procedures that encouraged civilian innovation rather than punishing it. Becca's reinstatement came with expanded authority to modify weapon systems while her methods were adopted as standard practice throughout Special Operations Command. The Syria incident investigation led to broader reforms in weapons procurement and maintenance, with civilian contractors empowered to exceed manufacturer specifications when improvements could be demonstrated. Her work became the template for a new approach to defense innovation, with technical excellence valued over bureaucratic compliance. The operators who'd supported her were vindicated, their judgment validated by official recognition of her contributions. The hearing's impact extended beyond military contracting to influence broader defense policy, with congressional leaders demanding more innovation and less institutional resistance to change. Media coverage shifted from criticism to celebration, with defense publications featuring her work as an example of successful civilian-military cooperation. The immediate consequences were transformative, proving that individual excellence could catalyze institutional reform when supported by evidence and political will. The Chen Protocol became the standard for evaluating civilian contractor modifications, with her technical documentation serving as the model for future innovations. Her success influenced military culture, demonstrating that expertise mattered more than credentials, and that innovation could come from unexpected sources. The weapons she'd modified became legendary within the Special Operations community, with her custom rack for Morrison's rifle serving as a shrine to precision craftsmanship. The broader defense industry adopted her methods, leading to improvements in weapon reliability and performance that benefited all branches of the military. Her story inspired a new generation of civilian contractors, particularly women engineers, who'd previously felt excluded from defense work. The institutional reform she'd catalyzed continued long after the hearing, with military procurement emphasizing performance over compliance and innovation over tradition. Academic institutions began studying her techniques, incorporating her methods into engineering curricula and military training programs. The legal precedents established by her case protected other civilian contractors from institutional retaliation, encouraging innovation throughout the defense industry. Her work influenced international military cooperation, with allied nations adopting similar approaches to weapons development and civilian contractor integration. The long-term impact was transformative, proving that individual excellence could reshape institutional culture when supported by evidence and determination. Becca's journey from overlooked contractor to recognized expert required courage that transcended technical competence to encompass institutional reform. Her vindication validated not just her methods, but her understanding that excellence demanded constant advocacy, that innovation required persistent courage, and that respect was earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted through credentials. The experience taught her that her work wasn't just about weapons, it was about the warriors who used them, the missions they supported, and the institutional culture that defined military effectiveness. Her transformation from ghost to recognized expert proved that civilian contractors could earn their place in military culture through excellence, dedication, and the willingness to fight for truth despite institutional resistance. Becca's story proved that excellence transcends credentials, that innovation can triumph over institutional resistance, and that respect is earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted through position or protocol.